You know that feeling? It's late at night, everything's quiet, but the world just feels off. Not because you heard a noise, but because the silence itself feels wrong. It's this deep, unsettling feeling that the rules you live by, the very fabric of reality, might just be a paper-thin illusion. Well, that's the unnerving territory we're diving into today.
H.P. Lovecraft, the absolute master of this kind of dread, he knew this stuff cold. He got that the most profound horror isn't about what's hiding in the shadows. No, it's about the shadows themselves. It's a kind of fear that doesn't just question your safety. It questions your entire reality.
So yeah, let's forget about ghosts and jump scares for a second. I want you to imagine looking in a mirror and seeing the very idea of a reflection just break. Imagine the laws of physics just call in sick one day. See, this is a kind of horror that doesn't just attack you, it attacks the foundation of your world.
Okay, so let's put a name to this feeling: metaphysical horror. Now, I'll be honest, it's not a perfect label. If you go digging around online, you'll find endless debates about what it is and isn't. So for our purposes, think of it less as a super strict genre and more as a specific, deeply unsettling atmosphere that some stories create. So what's our working definition going to be? Well, it's horror that messes with your intellect, not just your adrenaline. The terror comes from this slow, dawning realization that the neat, stable, predictable universe you thought you lived in, yeah, that's a comforting lie. The real horror is discovering that the operating system of reality has a fatal error. All right, so where does this horror actually come from? Well, one of its main sources is this thing you could call philosophical vertigo. It's that terrifying moment when you realize the map of reality you've been using your whole life is just fundamentally wrong. And the brilliant Polish philosopher Leszek Kołakowski, he actually pinned this feeling down. He called it metaphysical horror. And he argued that it all springs from this really devastating philosophical problem that pops up when we go searching for ultimate truth.
Okay, so stick with me here, because Kołakowski lays out this kind of horrifying chain of logic. It starts with us trying to find an absolute, one single reality that explains everything. But if you follow that thought, if this absolute is a perfect, unified one, then it can't have different parts or qualities. And what do you call something with no qualities, no features to define it? It's nothing. A void. The search for ultimate meaning, when pushed to its logical conclusion, leads you to ultimate emptiness.
And this has a flip side that's just as terrifying. Kołakowski said the same logic applies to our own consciousness. What happens if you try to find certainty only within yourself, completely isolated from everything else? Well, a self with nothing to define itself against also just collapses into nothingness. And that, right there, is the core terror. Any search for absolute certainty, whether it's out there or in here, ends in a void.
But this kind of dread doesn't always have to come from some grand, cosmic emptiness. Nope. Sometimes the most terrifying cracks in reality show up a lot closer to home. They happen when the things that are most familiar to us suddenly become deeply, deeply strange.
Sigmund Freud actually dug into this with his whole concept of the uncanny, or unheimlich in German. And the secret is baked right into the word itself. You see, heimlich means homely, familiar, stuff you know, but it also means concealed or secret. So unheimlich, the uncanny, isn't just about the strange. It's the horror of something familiar suddenly revealing a hidden, secret, and unsettling nature.
The philosopher Friedrich Schelling just nailed it with this quote. The uncanny isn't a monster from another dimension. It's the monster that was in your world the entire time, just hidden in plain sight. It's that feeling you get when you suddenly realize the friendly wallpaper in your childhood bedroom has a nightmarish pattern you just never saw before. The horror isn't the pattern, it's the revelation of a terrible truth about the reality you thought was safe.
So this brings us to what you could call two major flavors of this dread. Does the horror come from the vast, impersonal universe out there, or does it crawl out from the dark corners of our own minds?
So on one hand, you've got cosmic horror, which was perfected by H.P. Lovecraft. The terror here is totally external. It's the idea that we are absolutely insignificant specks in a vast, uncaring cosmos that doesn't even know we exist. Then, on the other hand, you have psychological horror. This is Edgar Allan Poe's territory. Here, the terror is internal. The universe might be perfectly fine, but your own mind, it's fracturing, and you just can't trust it.
Okay, so we've got the core concepts down. Now for the fun part. Let's see how these ideas are actually used to terrify us in some classic films and books. Just look at these examples.
In the Mouth of Madness literally has the main character realize he's just a character in a horror novel. In Annihilation, a totally familiar ecosystem becomes profoundly alien and uncanny. In The Shining, the Overlook Hotel is a place where the basic rules of space and time just don't apply anymore. In Jacob's Ladder is the ultimate nightmare of not knowing which reality is the real one. Each one of these weaponizes a different kind of metaphysical dread to get under your skin.
So why does this kind of horror feel so relevant right now? Well, it's because in a lot of ways that feeling of metaphysical dread has kind of leaked out of our screens and into our daily lives.
The scholar Brad Taubes argues that we live in a world that is becoming, in his words, unthinkable. We are constantly dealing with these massive, invisible forces that shape our lives but that we can't directly see or touch, from global pandemics to the slow, creeping dread of climate change.
I mean, this is the modern uncanny right here. The world looks normal, but we're told it's filled with all these invisible dangers. Carbon particles, chemicals in our plastics, pesticides on our food. And this creates a terrifying gap between what our senses tell us and what science tells us is real. The homely has become unhomely. We can't trust that what's familiar is actually safe anymore.
And that brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought, again from Kolakowski. He basically asks, if the universe really was pointless and meaningless, then how did we, a product of that very universe, ever evolve the ability to even think about the concept of meaninglessness? It's a paradox. Maybe the horror itself, our deep, unsettling fear that reality might be a fragile illusion, is the most profound evidence we have